Why aren't you eating dinner? My father-in-law asked, seeing us for the first time in a long time for New Year's. He must have noticed that there was only enough food at the dining room table for three. It happens all the time. What? My father-in-law looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law and husband. What exactly do you mean by it happens all the time? A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she? My mother-in-law responded casually while chewing on the hamburger steak I had made. That's right. Ruby is our slave. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat, my husband chimed in, echoing his mother's sentiment. As expected, he continued, he took me to his mother's every weekend to help her with housework, even though you couldn't give her grandchildren. I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom. I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused to go, my husband would verbally force me. He knows I have a short temper and difficulty finding my words. Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently. What are you talking about? My father-in-law seemed offended by the way my mother-in-law and husband referred to me as a slave. That's not how a normal family with children behaves. Ruby, it's not your fault. You should stop bullying her. What do you mean? You're the one that lives so far away, so stay out of the problem, my husband snapped back. That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren, my mother-in-law added, with a tone that sounded like they were mocking my father-in-law. I tossed the coffee beans in the grinder while listening to their conversation. My mother-in-law and husband always ordered me to bring them coffee as soon as they finished eating. I was so busy with shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweetbread earlier. Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing, I muttered to myself as if escaping from the grinder's blade. A single coffee bean fell to the floor. My name is Ruby and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During the weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, so we sought medical attention and were told that the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I was told that it is impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed shortly after that. Originally, we were both working and managing our own income and budgets. When I decided to leave my job, my husband took on the responsibility of covering our living expenses. He managed our savings, paid the bills for rent and insurance, and started giving me a monthly allowance. At first, we were able to live comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, when we stopped pursuing fertility treatments, my husband suggested we could save money. Since we don't have fertility treatments anymore, you can save money, were his first words after we made the decision to stop trying to conceive. Because of the financial burden of the treatment, I've been giving you more money for living expenses, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want, he added. True to his word, he gradually reduced the amount he gave me, first $800, then $600, and eventually $500 a month. There was a time when I desperately tried to find work, but even then, my mother-in-law interfered. Working as a full-time employee is not good for a wife, she asserted. If you don't share the housework, she will divorce you. So you're saying I shouldn't work? I questioned. Of course, if it's only part-time, then fine. You need to devote yourself to Carl and serve me. You can't even have grandchildren, so it's the least you can do, she replied. Despite enduring painful treatments, I couldn't conceive. My mother-in-law's attitude towards me changed drastically. She'd call me frequently, asking me to run errands, and I worked every weekend at their house. No matter what I did, she found fault and complained incessantly. Why are you folding laundry like that? Why not put the corners together and fold it correctly and neatly? Do it again, she'd scold, even throwing the laundry onto the floor once. It seemed like she relished in hurting me. One evening after dinner, my father-in-law noticed my distress and offered to take me out for a drink. I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me? He asked, showing concern for my well-being. His kindness touched me deeply, and I couldn't help but cry. I saw that, and if you want, you can vent to me, he reassured. He took me to a local bar where we sat across from each other, sharing a beer and a whiskey soda. As we ordered mixed nuts and a salad, his compassionate presence was a welcome relief from the turmoil at home. I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you, my father-in-law began, taking a sip of beer. He listened attentively as I poured out my grievances about how his wife and son had treated me since I stopped fertility treatments. I'm blamed for not being able to have children and am forced to run errands, I confided. My husband wouldn't let me work full-time, and he's reduced my living expenses since we stopped the treatments. Now, he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave, I continued. Elizabeth is not happy unless she gets her way. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her, and now we pretend to be a happy couple. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with me? I'm jealous my father-in-law has a place to escape to, I admitted. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard, he observed. Yeah, but venting to you makes me feel better, I admitted gratefully. Good, that makes me happy, he said before we had one more beer and one more whiskey soda before leaving the restaurant. However, as soon as we arrived back home, the situation escalated. I'm back, I announced as I opened the door, only to find my mother-in-law and husband standing there. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? My husband questioned, eyeing both of us. What? I just invited Ruby for a drink, my father-in-law clarified. What kind of relationship is this that you can go out for drinks together? My mother-in-law interjected angrily. Just like your husband said, I retorted, feeling the tension mounting. What are you thinking, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires, my husband accused, joining in the finger pointing. Enough. A powerful voice echoed as if thunder had struck. My father-in-law was enraged, staring down Carl and Elizabeth. What is it with you? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax, he thundered, his anger palpable. The rage sped up my heart rate, I thought, noting the intensity of the moment. Mild men or people can become more difficult to deal with when injured, I mused, watching Elizabeth shudder at her name being called. Was she scared of him, or did she have something to hide? You said what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? My husband challenged. That's my daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I took her to get her mind off it. That's what happened because of Ruby, my father-in-law clarified, cutting through the tension with his explanation. I can't have grandchildren, my mother-in-law's accusation hung in the air, a barb aimed directly at me. The words ignited a desire to yell, to defend myself against her constant blame for not providing her with grandkids. How can you say that when you hate children? I wanted to retort, but I bit my tongue. Yet even in my silence, I couldn't shake the urge to challenge her unfair judgment. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? I finally spoke up, my voice edged with frustration. That said, I don't think you wanted grandchildren enough to treat Ruby like this. You're just making an excuse to point the finger at her. My mother-in-law seemed about to respond, but then she abruptly averted her gaze. Was she tongue-tied or perhaps fearful of her husband's reaction? Carl, wait, my attention shifted to my husband. I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? I probed, unable to ignore the discrepancy. No, I pay rent and insurance, he countered, but his evasive response left room for doubt. As the silence stretched, he seemed unable to conjure a convincing explanation. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get right to it, my father-in-law intervened, leading us to the living room. What do you mean discuss our future? Just sit down, my mother-in-law commanded, her tone imperious. Make some coffee first, Ruby, she ordered, her words laced with condescension. But my father-in-law's sharp rebuke cut through the air. Don't tell her what to do. I complied silently, sensing the tension crackling around me. As the coffee brewed, my father-in-law resumed speaking, his tone authoritative. I'll be retired in a few years after my current assignment ends. I won't be living with you anymore. The revelation left my husband and mother-in-law stunned. What do you mean? They both protested in unison. We've been masquerading as a couple for years, so we no longer need to live together, my father-in-law explained calmly. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. But my mother-in-law's panic was palpable. That's fine, but I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier, she protested, rising from her seat. I'm selling the house, Elizabeth. I'll leave you nowhere to live. Her announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Why don't you just get a place to live? My father-in-law suggested. But her response was desperate. How am I going to do that? I can pay the rent. Get Carl to help you, my father-in-law suggested, unaware of the financial strain. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. But my husband's nervousness betrayed him as he struggled to respond. That's not possible, he stammered, his discomfort evident. We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt. The revelation hung in the air, casting a shadow over the room. You just mentioned debt, didn't you? My father-in-law's tone turned grave. Explain. I didn't mean what I said. I said explain. My father-in-law's voice thundered through the room, his anger palpable. My mother-in-law dissolved into tears at the sound of his fury, but his rage remained unabated. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer, my husband confessed, his expression resigned. Around the time we stopped fertility treatment, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but then the stock market crashed, he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? I interjected, incredulous at the revelation. I used family funds. At the time, we were betting on stocks that were supposed to go up, but eventually we ended up in debt. Now, I'm paying it with my salary and Mom's repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket, my husband explained, his tone heavy with the weight of their financial burden. The news caught me off guard. I had never heard anything about stocks or debt. My mother-in-law had lost a significant amount of money in the stock market and had borrowed to compensate for it when I stopped fertility treatment. She must have tried to repay the debt by investing in stocks that were expected to rise. But as they struggled with repayment, those stocks failed to yield returns. Maybe. I couldn't help but voice my thoughts. That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave. Ruby, what are you trying to say? Were you just taking it out on me? My mother-in-law challenged, her voice strained. The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt it's because she wanted a grandchild so badly. But the simple answer is that she was taking it out on me because that was satisfying, I countered, the bitterness evident in my tone. As expected, my mother-in-law remained silent, her guilt hanging heavy in the air. And Carl used the money that he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He could save money because there's no fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some strange, unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt, I concluded, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You stupid idiot. Finally, my father-in-law erupted, his frustration boiling over. Even if it's family money, it's money. I worked for and saved for you, only for you to invest it in stocks without consulting me. To top it all off, you lost it all. What the hell kind of money are you spending? My father-in-law exploded, his frustration boiling over. With those words, he abruptly left the room, as if struck by a sudden realization. We all followed him, wondering what he was up to. What are you doing? My husband questioned as we trailed behind him. Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I'll check what she's buying, my father-in-law demanded, his tone sharp. Stop, Elizabeth cried, her voice tinged with panic, but her husband paid her no heed. He swung open the closet door, revealing a trove of luxury handbags. Rudy, are these bags expensive? They're all luxury items costing over $1,000, my father-in-law remarked, his tone incredulous. As he opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet, an array of accessories greeted our eyes, rings, necklaces, and earrings, some adorned with diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones. Picking up a ring, I noticed the engraving indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me? My father-in-law's disappointment was palpable. I'm sorry, but, Elizabeth began, but her husband cut her off with a look of disgust. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave. Divorce. I want a divorce, and I won't take no for an answer, he declared, his voice resolute. But how am I supposed to live? Elizabeth protested, her voice trembling. Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move, my father-in-law retorted, leaving Elizabeth speechless. My husband, no longer wearing his arrogant demeanor, nodded silently, his gaze averted. The next day, my father-in-law presented 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Ruby. If you want to file for divorce too, he offered, handing one to me. I glanced at my husband, who sighed and turned away. Of course, I wanted a divorce, but more importantly, we wanted alimony from these people. That night, as I lay awake, I pondered the events of the past years. How long had I suffered in silence? What did I want now? I had once yearned for a child, enduring agonizing fertility treatments, only to realize I couldn't conceive. I continued my story, holding back the tears welling in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I endured in hopes of becoming a mother seemed futile now. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't have a baby. As I grieved, Carl informed me that since I no longer needed fertility treatment, he would reduce my living expenses. What are you saying? This is all Carl's fault, Elizabeth interjected, her voice sharp. My father-in-law's horror was palpable, and my mother-in-law fell silent, her accusations hanging in the air. She had blamed me for not giving her a grandchild and then treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Naturally, there was no response from Elizabeth or Carl. In the end, Carl's actions were driven by his need to pay off debts, while Elizabeth sought an outlet for the stress of financial losses in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this, I declared, my voice firm. What if I say I won't pay? Carl retorted defiantly. Sure, I'll talk to my lawyer, I shot back, my resolve unwavering. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. Within days of putting his house on the market, he found a buyer who intended to tear down the old house and clear the land to build a new one. Left with nowhere to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment, barely holding together. She now resides with my ex-husband, struggling to make ends meet while paying off their debts and alimony to me, a financial burden I'm sure weighs heavily on them. Meanwhile, I found solace in a beautiful little apartment and secured a clerical job at a security company, thanks to my father-in-law's support. He encouraged me to utilize my accounting knowledge and skills from working at a bank. I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just tell me anything, he reassured me, his unwavering support a beacon of hope. With my father-in-law by my side, I embarked on this new chapter, determined to shine on my own. As I dressed for my first day of work, I made a promise to myself to embrace this fresh start and forge my path to happiness.